The day a 26-year-old with a Dartmouth MBA and his uncle's last name tried to teach me how relationships work. That was the day I watched a $480 million land deal collapse because someone confused having access to a database with actually earning trust. I'd spent 19 years at Advanced Development Group as Senior Director of Land Acquisitions. That title sounds exactly as boring as it is at a cocktail party, so let me put it another way. When Old Money, Tennessee families decided they might be willing to sell land that had been in their bloodline for 4 generations, they called me. Not our company. Me, personally. As it turned out, that distinction was about to matter more than anyone in that building understood. Our office was on the 14th floor of a glass tower in downtown Nashville, which always struck me as a little ironic, given that the actual work happened on gravel driveways and front porches with ceiling fans and sweet tea. I'd learned this from Gus Patton, a man who'd worked alongside our founder Roland Vance in the early days, who told me in my very first year, "Son, land doesn't belong to companies, it belongs to families, and families don't trust companies, they trust people." I'd carried that with me for 2 decades, and it showed. My contact system was a thick 3-ring binder, index tabs, handwritten notes in the margins, business cards tucked into soft plastic sleeves, phone numbers from people who didn't have websites, private lines for folks who made decisions worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but had never sent a cold email in their lives. The biggest deal of my career was sitting on my desk that Tuesday morning. Silas Dunbar, 69 years old, former state senator, 4th-generation landowner from Maury County, had finally agreed to sell his family's 640 acres to us. 640 acres his great-grandfather had homesteaded in 1898. The land ran along the Duck River, and on it sat a working grain operation, 2 tenant farmhouses, and a 19th-century stone barn that Silas's grandfather had built by hand from limestone pulled off the property. $480 million. And the number almost didn't matter. What mattered was everything underneath it. Silas wasn't just selling land. He was trusting someone with his family's legacy, the barn his grandfather built, the 2 tenant families who'd farmed those fields for 30 combined years, the Dunbar name that he wanted on the entrance gate to whatever we developed there. These weren't line items in a contract. They were promises built on years of showing up. I'd met Silas through his cousin at a Tennessee Farm Bureau charity auction in 2009. We'd outbid each other on a cured ham and laughed about it, and by the end of the night I had a business card. 2 years later, his cousin introduced us at a dove shoot outside Lewisburg. Silas didn't talk business that day. We talked about his grandfather, the drought of 1988, and whether Vanderbilt football would ever be worth watching again. In 2014, his wife passed. I drove 2 hours each way to the funeral and never once mentioned work. 4 years after that, he called me on a Saturday morning and said he was thinking about selling, and that if he ever did, he wanted it to be with me. That is not a business relationship. It is something else entirely, and it does not live in any database on earth. I was reviewing the Heritage Center specifications when the conference room door opened, and Parker Red walked in like he'd been doing it for years. He was Roland Vance's nephew on his mother's side, 26 years old, freshly minted MBA from Dartmouth, and carrying the kind of easy confidence that comes from never having been told no by anyone who could actually back it up. Designer loafers, expensive watch, the particular brand of arrogance that doesn't know it's arrogance because it's never had reason to look in a mirror. He didn't introduce himself. He walked to my desk and looked at my binder, the way you look at a piece of furniture you're about to replace. "What is that?" "My contact system." He picked it up without asking, turned pages with a slight frown, like a man at a garage sale deciding something wasn't worth his time. "You're managing landowner contacts in a paper binder." "Certain contacts, yes. We have Salesforce. We have a full CRM with geotagged property data, automated follow-up sequences, and an analytics dashboard. This," he set the binder back down, "is a liability. If you walk out of here tomorrow, this information walks out with you." I looked at this kid and thought about Silas Dunbar, who'd called my personal cell at 6:30 on a Sunday morning 6 months prior, because his attorney had raised a concern about a right-of-way easement and he needed someone he trusted, not someone whose extension was listed on a company directory. "When Silas Dunbar gives me his private number, he's giving it to me," I said, "not to a corporate system. That's the whole point." Parker's expression sharpened. "You mean the Dunbar acquisition? The $480 million project?" "That's the one. That information is a company asset." He straightened up. "I'm the new VP of Digital Operations. Roland asked me to run a compliance audit across all departments. I need everything in that binder uploaded to Salesforce by end of business Friday. The floor had gone quiet. Charlotte, our CFO, had drifted to the doorway. A row of junior analysts had stopped pretending to look at their monitors. "No," I said. Parker blinked. He'd clearly never used that script before. "Excuse me?" "No, I won't be doing that." The recalibration was visible. You could watch him search for a different approach and come up short. This is a compliance directive, not a request. And I'm telling you that uploading private contact information shared with me in personal confidence by landowners, who have specifically chosen to stay out of corporate databases, would be a violation of their trust and potentially a breach of our letter of intent with the Dunbar estate. So no. Something in his face went hard and small. You're obstructing a company-wide initiative. I'm protecting a $480 million deal. You're protecting your own little kingdom, he said, louder now, his voice carrying across the open floor plan. The junior analysts weren't even pretending anymore. You've built a system where this company can't function without you personally. That's not professionalism. That's a hostage situation. I'll be honest. That one stung. Not because it had merit, but because he'd rehearsed it. You could hear the shape of it, the kind of line someone works out in a mirror. It had the architecture of a real argument without any of the substance. "Parker," I said, keeping my voice level, "I have a closing meeting with Silas Dunbar in 4 days. I'd suggest we table this until after Friday." "I don't think we will." His arms crossed. "You're refusing a direct directive from a company vice president. That's insubordination." "That's one interpretation." "You're fired." He said it like someone testing a phrase they'd always wanted to use, checking the feel of the words in his mouth. I looked at him for a long moment. Every person on that floor was frozen. You could hear the HVAC system humming, the distant sound of traffic 14 stories below, the quiet mechanical hum of ceiling lights. "All right," I said. He'd expected a fight, maybe some begging, certainly some raised voices. The absolute calm of my response took something out of him. He opened his mouth and closed it again. "Security will walk you out. Leave anything company-related on your desk." "Of course," I said. I stood, straightened my jacket, and picked up the binder. His hand landed on it. "That stays." I looked at his hand, then at his face. "This binder contains personal contacts given to me in personal confidence. It belongs to me the same way your cell phone belongs to you. I'll be taking it." I held his gaze until he moved his hand. Then I picked up the binder, left my company laptop on the desk, and walked out. Roy, head of building security, a quiet man from Gallatin who'd worked the lobby desk for 11 years and knew everyone's sandwich order, was waiting in the hall with an expression like a man who'd been asked to do something that didn't sit right with him. "Sorry about this," he said low. "Nothing to be sorry about. You didn't fire me." He walked me to the elevator. Just before the doors closed, he said quietly, "He called down 20 minutes before he came upstairs. Had this planned before he walked through your door." I nodded. The door slid shut. There was a diner across the street. I sat in a corner booth, ordered coffee, and gave myself exactly 20 minutes to feel 19 years worth of things. The early days when I'd driven 4 hours round trip to shake a landowner's hand over a deal that never closed. The deals that did close. The golf games and the dove shoots and the funerals and the charity auctions. The Saturday morning Silas had called me instead of anyone else. Then I pulled out my personal cell phone and dialed a number I knew without looking it up. 2 rings. "This is Silas." "Silas, it's me." A brief pause. "Well now, wasn't expecting you until Friday. Everything's still on track." "That's what I'm calling about. There's been a development." The warmth in his voice settled into something quieter and more attentive. He'd been a state senator for 8 years. He knew what the word development meant in that tone. "Tell me." I told him all of it. Parker's demands, the binder, the public firing. I kept it factual and didn't add color. Silas could read between lines better than most attorneys, and he didn't need me to editorialize. When I finished, there was silence, long enough that I counted it. 7 seconds. "They fired you 4 days before closing," he said. "This morning." "And who are they planning to send to my attorney's office on Friday?" "My understanding is Parker Red." Another silence, shorter, different quality. "How old is Parker Red?" 26. I heard him exhale, not quite a sigh, more the sound of a decision being made by someone who had made a great many of them. "Do you remember the first time we really talked?" Not the auction. After. At the dove shoot. I remember. We talked about my grandfather. About what it took to keep land in a family for 4 generations in this part of the country. I remember. It wasn't capital, he said. It was knowing who to trust and who to walk away from. I've been doing that for 69 years, and I have never once regretted erring on the side of caution. A pause. I have a proposition for you. Are you free Thursday evening? I'm unemployed, Silas. I'm free all week. He chuckled, a dry, unhurried sound. Come to the house, 6 o'clock. Tell the woman at the gate I'm expecting you. His voice dropped slightly. And don't sign anything with Vance Development before then. Not a severance package, not an NDA, not a thank you note, nothing. Understood. Good. I'll see you Thursday. I sat with that coffee for a long time after the call ended. It tasted better than anything I'd had in recent memory. Silas Dunbar's farm sat at the end of a gravel road off Highway 50, past 2 cattle gates and a stand of cedar trees old enough to have been planted by his father. The house was white clapboard, wide front porch, the kind of place that had been added onto and loved and repaired for a very long time. The stone barn was visible from the driveway, lit up amber in the October evening light, hand-cut limestone, original mortar, 130 years and still standing straight. He was on the porch when I pulled in, 2 glasses of sweet tea on the table beside him. We talked for the first 20 minutes about nothing consequential. His granddaughter's volleyball tournament. Whether the sorghum had come in right this year, the last good rain they'd had. That was how Silas operated. Business arrived when it arrived, and you didn't push it through a door it hadn't reached yet. Then he went inside and came back with a manila folder. Dunbar Land Holdings is looking to bring on a director of development relations, he said. Managing the transition of the sale, coordinating with whatever firm takes the project forward, representing our interests through construction and into build-out. He set the folder on the table between us. $240,000 a year, plus a transaction fee on every deal you bring us that closes. The first transaction being this one. I opened the folder. The offer letter was already drafted, professional, complete. I started. I know I didn't have to, he said, before I could finish. Here's the truth. I was already having second thoughts about Vance Development before this week. Things I'd heard about how they'd handled a project up in Robertson County. The way they'd treated some subcontractors on their Franklin County job. A man's behavior in smaller matters tells you a great deal about his intentions in larger ones. He picked up his tea. This just resolved the question. You want to know something else? Tell me. The letter of intent names you personally as the primary liaison. There's a relationship continuity clause. If Vance Development sends anyone else to that table on Friday, they're in technical breach. He looked at me over his glass. My attorney flagged it 3 weeks ago. I didn't bring it up because I hoped I wouldn't need to. I looked at the offer letter again. You had this prepared before you called me. I had it prepared before I even heard from you. He almost smiled. When a company fires the only man holding together the most important deal of their year, 4 days before closing, that tells you something. I didn't need to know the particulars. I already knew what I needed to know about you. I signed it on his kitchen table at 7:15, with the front door open and the sound of crickets coming in from the fields. Friday morning, 9:45. I walked into the lobby of Vance Development Group wearing my best charcoal suit and a visitor badge issued by Dunbar Land Holdings. I didn't time my arrival to be dramatic. I signed the visitor log, nodded at Roy, and stood near the atrium with my hands in my pockets. Roy saw me immediately. His eyes widened for half a second, then his expression went carefully neutral. We'd known each other 11 years. He understood things without having them explained. At 9:58, Parker Red came out of the elevator bay moving fast, a portfolio under his arm, and a new tie that told me he'd taken this meeting seriously. He stopped when he saw me across the marble floor. What are you doing here? Not a question. Meeting with a client. You don't work here. I know, I work for the client. The color left his face in a way that was almost cinematic, not a blush but the opposite, a draining. You're representing Dunbar? Charlotte stepped off the elevator behind him and went still when she saw me. The lobby had slowed around us. People who'd been moving toward elevators were finding reasons to check their phones, adjust their bags, linger. Dunbar Land Holdings, I said. Director of Development Relations. Silas asked me to be here this morning. Parker's jaw worked. He was doing the arithmetic in real time and running into walls on all sides. He'd fired me to assert control. He'd picked the wrong person in the wrong relationship at the worst possible moment. Charlotte said quietly, "Parker, we should." "This has to be a conflict of interest," Parker said, louder. "He has proprietary company information." "He has a personal contact binder," Charlotte said. Her voice was steady and very tired. It was always his. Silas Dunbar walked through the revolving door at that exact moment, and the lobby fell as quiet as a church. At 69, Silas moved with the particular gravity of a man who had held the same ground for generations. Not the hurried energy of new money, but the settled, unhurried confidence of someone whose word had been bankable since before most people in that building were born. He wore a dark suit that had been made for him. Old boots resoled more than replaced. He looked around the lobby the way you'd look at a place you were considering purchasing, noting details, making assessments, not hurrying. His eyes found me first. He crossed the marble and shook my hand. "Good morning." "Morning, Silas." He turned and looked at Parker, then at Charlotte. A full, unhurried look, the kind that doesn't require an expression to communicate what it's communicating. "I believe I have a 9 o'clock meeting," he said. "Which one of you is Parker Red?" Parker stepped forward, stuck out his hand, tried to reassemble himself into something that looked like a VP. "Mr. Dunbar, Parker Red, VP of Digital Operations. I'll be leading this project going forward on behalf of Vance." "I'm aware of who you are," Silas said. He let the handshake hang for a beat longer than was comfortable before he took it. Brief, firm, the kind of handshake that communicated exactly as much as it intended to. "Your company called my office on Wednesday and told my assistant that your previous contact had stepped away voluntarily due to a family situation. There was some miscommunication in how that was." "There was a misrepresentation," Silas said. Not loud, not emotional. Precise, the way a man is precise when he's decided something. "That gentleman is standing right here wearing a bear badge, which means someone in your organization either lied to me directly or authorized someone else to. I have been in business for 40 years. He looked at Parker the way you look at a problem once you've identified its source. "I don't work with companies that do either." Charlotte stepped in. "Mr. Dunbar, we can address this immediately. Full reinstatement, senior title, whatever compensation." Silas looked at me with one eyebrow raised. "No," I said. "I'm settled where I am." He turned back to Charlotte. "Then there is no one here I trust to move this project forward." He picked up his hat from where he'd set it on the reception desk. "My attorney will be in touch with yours regarding the relationship continuity clause in the letter of intent. Good morning, folks." He walked out through the revolving door without breaking stride. I followed him into the October air, leaving behind 19 years and the sound of Parker Red trying to find something to say. In his truck, Silas was quiet for the first 3 blocks. Then he said, almost to himself, "My grandfather used to say a man who lies to get a deal done has already told you everything you need to know about how he'll behave after it closes." Smart man. "Stubborn as a fence post," Silas said. "Right about most things." He glanced at me. "We'll find the right partner for this. There are a few firms I've had my eye on, old enough to understand that some things take time. I've got some thoughts on that." "I figured you might." He almost smiled. "That's why I hired you." What happened next moved the way things do when $500 million evaporates in a public lobby. By midday, Vance Development stock had dropped 11%. By market close, it was down 19%. The Nashville Business Journal had the story by Monday morning. Not all the details, but enough. Failed land deal signals leadership instability at Vance Group. The board called an emergency session. By Tuesday afternoon, Parker Red had been quietly transitioned out of his VP of Digital Operations position, a role that I later learned had been invented specifically for him when Roland Vance couldn't find a single existing executive willing to have the boy report to them. Parker signed an NDA and received a settlement that represented considerably more money than he'd have earned doing actual work. Roland Vance himself survived, but in the diminished way that tends to be permanent after a board loses confidence. They brought in an outside COO. Charlotte got a direct line to the board she'd been fighting for since before I could remember. They tried everything to salvage the deal. Roland called my cell on Saturday morning. I let it go to voicemail. His message was 18 seconds long and included the phrase, "work something out." I listened to it twice and deleted it. A delegation flew to Maury County uninvited. Silas's gate was closed, and nobody answered the intercom. 6 months later, Silas and I sat across from the principals of Hargrove Family Properties, a third-generation development group out of Lexington. with a track record of exactly the kind of heritage-centered work Silas had always wanted. We negotiated for 11 days. The stone barn stayed in the plans. The two tenant families received right of first employment at the Agricultural Heritage Center Silas had envisioned. The Dunbar name went on the entrance gate in carved limestone. Final sale price, $497 million, $17 million more than Vance Development had ever offered. At the closing dinner, Silas ordered a bottle of bourbon that I suspect cost more than my first car. We toasted his grandfather, the stone barn, and the particular folly of young men who mistake a login credential for actual knowledge of the world. I still carry my contact binder. It has a new section now, the Hargrove people, a handful of other families I've met through Silas, names and numbers written in pencil, because those are always the ones that end up mattering most. The digital folks can have their Salesforce dashboards, and their analytics, and their automated follow-up sequences. I'll keep the binder. Charlotte landed on her feet at a regional firm that actually understood what 18 years of institutional knowledge was worth. Roy retired with a full pension and a set of fly fishing gear his grandkids pooled money to buy him. Parker Red is apparently working for a tech startup in Austin that's trying to disrupt agricultural land transactions with a mobile app. I don't know the details. I don't particularly need to. Some things genuinely cannot be digitized. Some lessons have to be paid for at full price by the people who earned them. And some handshakes, the old-fashioned kind over sweet tea on a front porch with the barn visible in the distance, turn out to be worth considerably more than anyone put in a spreadsheet.